what is probably one of the more obvious photo composition rules is also one of the most important ones, in the sense that it's one that, while it seems simple, is also quite a challenge to a lot of photographers, especially beginning photographers, because it might involve the most uncomfortable part of being a photographer, and that is getting in the midst of situations. And we'll talk as we continue through class about ways to make that uncomfortable situation less uncomfortable, but also the importance of what it says here, which is getting close and then getting closer. When we get very in close on a subject, especially a person, and especially a person's face, it only increases the emotional impact of the photo. Sometimes a photo that from a distance seems sort of uninteresting becomes very interesting when we get zoomed in on faces. Now, I just used the term zoomed in, which we have equipment that allows us to, from a distance, get in quite close. And that can sometimes, even maybe most of the time, be enough, be effective enough to make our photos dramatic and high quality and emotional. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it requires us to get in close enough. The less zoom we use on a lens, the cleaner and more clear our photos are. And so being able to get in close with a non-zoom lens is going to always provide even just a little bit higher quality photograph than if we were using a long zoom. To look at a couple of examples of this, we have this photo from a funeral in New Orleans. It's kind of a small photograph, but we see that this trumpet player's face is literally almost touching the lens. It's so close. And while we see a lot of context in the background, it gives us the understanding of what this event is. The focus is right there in his face. And it would have been difficult to have stood at a distance and gotten this photo because there's probably people all around him. So being able to be right there in the midst of the action made this photo great. This photo of a soldier at a funeral there's not a lot in this photograph. It's not even his entire face. It's not his whole head. We only know he's a soldier from the shine of the brim on his dress uniform hat. And yet, of course, the focus of this photograph is the tear that is coming from his eye. And this photograph could be taken from a distance with a high-powered zoom lens, but as we see again, perhaps we don't know in this photo what surrounds him. If he is surrounded by people, if he is, all alone. We don't know from this photo because this photo contains just a little bit of of subject matter, but that subject matter, because we are so close, is very emotional. Now I'll stop right here for a second and say, because this is, like we said, a military funeral, the last thing you want to be doing at a very solemn occasion is running up in someone's face and taking a photograph. And that's why we have to really work on the balance of appropriateness between being in the midst of the action and standing back and using our technology. Now, we aren't likely in our class situations to be in situations that are, this emotionally charged, at like a funeral or something like that, although it's not impossible for that to happen. But even in situations like we would have school meetings or mass or even some sporting events where we don't really want to be, quote unquote, in the way, it is really a hard balance to strike between doing what you need to do to get your photograph and still allowing the story to unfold without your interference. This is a photo that I know this was on one of your presentations of this young man, which this is luckily a toy gun, but pointing this gun with this really intense scowl on his face. and the gun is so close to the camera that it's out of focus, which again provides the drama. And then this is a photo only from about a year and a half ago that was the cover of National Geographic magazine, which is very similar to the photos that I know another one of you put in your historic presentation. But this, we have just her eyes. And I think what's so impressive about this photo is that though it is just her eyes, there is so much story behind this photograph. And you can see that in all of these, that though there's just a small amount of subject matter, because they are so close, there is so much emotion in them that we can draw a story from that.